Hello, chefs. Today we talk brining poultry, understanding your spice cabinet, and systems that help you control your environment. I am Mark Grigsby, your chef and guide through this experience, and this is the IncrEDIBLE Discourse. So a quick update before we get started on what we've been up to. So a couple of weeks ago, I started doing YouTube shorts to promote the show. I started out doing a bit called Hard Truths to promote the show and had some pretty good success. So over the last few weeks, I started doing different categories as kind of a spin-off to the episodes for the show. If you haven't seen them yet, check them out. Some of them are kind of funny and all of them are really informative. My wife and my mom say that my hair looks funny, so comment on them and let me know. I think the hair is amazing, by the way. It's my signature look. Also, the resources page on the website is now up and going. It takes a lot to produce these pages, but it's packed with information. I feel like for a free resource, it gives a lot of information in one place. A lot of it may or may not be common knowledge, but the goal was to create a foundational piece to refer to help you grow, or at least reinforce the basics. I also created a PDF version that gives you all of the information in a downloadable document in case you want to have a hard copy of it. So if you get a chance to check those out, let me know what you think. Or if you have a suggestion or if there's a resource that you'd like to see, drop me a comment and share your thoughts. Anyhow, so today I wanted to continue on with poultry. 2 weeks ago, we talked about breaking down the whole bird and the benefits of doing so. This week, I want to talk about brining poultry and why that's important. It's a simple method, but has a huge impact on your product. According to multiple online sources, chicken and poultry in general is the second most consumed protein in the entire world. So we should do some justice and make that shit taste good. Our second segment today will be about understanding your spice cabinet and touch on how you can use these relatively inexpensive ingredients to transform basic cooking into next-level restaurant-quality dishes. We'll tie that back into the brine, as in most brines we lean on the spice cabinet. For my pros today, we're going to be talking about systems, what they are and what their purpose is. Restaurant systems help keep the routine intact, track costs and keep them down, track inventory, and a bunch of other things. Not every single restaurant has the same exact systems that do the same thing in the next restaurant. But today, we're going to go over the most common systems, how they work, and why, if used properly, they keep you on track and your head above water. So without further ado, let's get this show on the road. So I suppose to be fair, we should define what a brine is and then go from there. Brining is the process of soaking meat in a solution of salt and water, sometimes with sugars, spices, and aromatics, and can be done as a wet or dry brine. So, why do we do it? And that's a fair question too. We do it for three main reasons. The number one reason, I think, is to retain moisture. Salt changes the protein structure in the meat, allowing it to absorb and retain more liquid. During the cooking process, brine poultry loses less water, meaning it stays juicy even when it's slightly overcooked. And this is true. I know that when I did my first couple of Thanksgiving turkeys a long time ago, before my culinary life started, it felt like it was such a chore. The first one, I was younger and my focus was more about getting stuff out on the table on time and looking good. The bird was slightly overcooked, and by the time it was carved and hit the plate, it was dry as shit. And I could tell my guests knew it because there was a ton of turkey left over and zero gravy left. So the next year, when I did the bird, I became borderline obsessive. I pretty much stood next to the oven the last 30 to 45 minutes with a thermometer in hand, checking compulsively. And then in the end, started questioning everything because the timer went off, but the bird wasn't done. I realized that it took longer because I kept opening and closing the oven to check it and let the heat out every time. By the time I got it hot enough again, it was already time for me to open and check it again. Fucking rookie shit. So let's fast forward. I go to culinary school. I'm working constantly, and I haven't done Thanksgiving for a long time. But by then, I learned the power of brining. I paid attention to the Thanksgiving dinners and how they were prepared on the occasions that I actually could attend and realized where I'd gone wrong those times in the past. Now I brine my bird every year and it's delicious. I get the crispiest skin, the juiciest bird, almost to a point where I don't even need gravy. Oh, almost. My gravy is pretty fucking banging in my opinion. But this process is easy and anyone can do it. Anyone. Evidently, it took me time to learn and discover it on my own, but today I'm going to give you guys the tip. Brine your poultry. All of it. Turkey, chicken, squab, fowl. A brine always does justice to your birds. The second reason why we brine our birds is because it enhances flavor. I think this is a pretty obvious one, but can be expanded so much more. Salt travels into the meat, seasoning it beneath the surface. Aromatics like ginger, garlic, citrus, and herbs can gently infuse flavor into the muscle. And brine doesn't have like a set recipe. There's really just one ingredient that you need, whether it's a wet brine or a dry brine, and that's salt. In my restaurants for a long time running now, I have religiously brined my chicken wings. When I first began doing this, I was pickle brining them. This was an amazing way to showcase such a simple ingredient and went along with the concept of the restaurant. One of our signature beverages was the pickleback. You know, the fucking shot of Irish whiskey and the chaser of pickle juice. If you've never had one of those and you like pickles, you should indulge yourself. It's really an amazing combination. Some say we were the first bar in Miami to come up with it and feature this pairing a long time ago. This was, long time. Anyway, the wings were brined for 24 hours in pickle juice and then fried in the deep fryer naked until the skin crisped up nicely and were juicy as shit on the inside. I sold a huge amount of these wings without any sauce at all, just salt and pepper dusted. That's how good they were. Now, many years later, I still brine my chicken wings in every restaurant I feature them in, although the brine has changed to more of a spicy brine. Now I use a combination of vinegar, water, and Scotch bonnet peppers with a ton of aromatics and spices to create a different, just as flavorful wing. But the premise is still there, the brine. And that little story leads me to the last reason why we brine our poultry. It improves the texture. Brining poultry gives the skin of the bird that nice, crispy outside that traps the moisture inside of the meat. That bite of crispy and contrasting soft and juicy is one of the best bites as far as texture goes that there is when executed correctly. For leaner cuts like the breast, brining prevents them from going dry, which is a typical characteristic of those particular cuts. Brining results in a tender, succulent bite every single time. And I myself am not a breast kind of guy. I always find it to be chewy and dry. So I tend to always go for the thigh. But a brine breast is truly amazing. I know that if the bird has been brined, I'll eat a breast every time. It's really that good. So, let's break down the science behind the brining process so that we can get a better idea of what we're actually doing here. Salt dissolves myosin and partially denatures it. And what is myosin, you're going to ask me? Well, myosin is a motor protein that generates movement within cells. Basically, myosin is a protein that makes up muscle fibers in meat, like chicken, turkey, pork, etc., right? Think of it like the ropey structure inside muscle tissue. It's responsible for muscle movement when animals are alive, and after they're processed, it's what gives meat its firm texture. So when you brine your poultry, the salt dissolves some of this myosin, loosening the muscle fibers and causing the meat to become tender. When we denature it, it means to change its shape, similar to how heat scrambles an egg. When this myosin gets denatured by salt, it uncoils and opens up, creating tiny little gaps and channels. Within these gaps and channels, water and flavor become trapped, making the meat juicy and flavorful. So instead of staying tight and squeezing out all the natural juices when you cook the meat, brine poultry holds onto this moisture and makes the meat taste seasoned all the way through. So basically, salt helps the bird hold its juices by softening its muscle fibers. Brining dates back thousands of years, likely with early civilizations using salt to preserve food way before refrigeration existed. The earliest records show salting and brining were used to preserve meats and fish in ancient Mesopotamia. China and Egypt also used salt solutions like brines. to preserve anything from meats to vegetables, and get this, even mummies. The Romans pickled and brined fish and meat as a common practice. Roman soldiers often carried those items with them on long campaigns. Originally, brining was a method of preservation and extending the life of food in pre-refrigeration times. But by the Middle Ages, brining evolved from a food storage technique into a flavor and texture enhancement. Particularly in Europe, where it became used for many things like pork and sausage, poultry and fish. In colonial America, households often had brining barrels for storing pork, poultry, and game meats. Today, in the modern kitchen, brining shifted from survival to strategic cooking for moisture retention, flavor infusion, and better texture. It's a deliberate step used by chefs and home cooks to elevate lean meats like chicken, turkey, and pork, all of which tend to dry out when they're cooking it. So let's go through a basic wet brine formula, and then expand a little bit on where you could go with it. Then we'll touch on how long you should brine different types of meats so you get an idea of the process in its entirety. A typical basic brine that doesn't offer a variation in flavor but just does the job of keeping your bird moist with crispy skin is this simple: 1/4 cup of salt and 1 quart or 4 cups of water. Literally, that's it. And it's more of a ratio than a recipe. For every 4 cups of water or 1 quart of water, you need 1/4 cup of kosher salt. And it must be kosher salt. It cannot be table salt. Table salt is more dense, meaning you need more, which oftentimes leaves your meat salty. There is such thing as too much salt in this ratio. So stick to this ratio and you'll be a winner every time. Now, to enhance this basic ratio or recipe is quite really up to you. You can flavor this however you want to, really. I think my only suggestion would be to think about your entire dish as a whole and then create your brine recipe. You wouldn't want to add Caribbean flavors if you're making a classic American Southern-style dish. Or maybe you would, I don't know. Maybe you're creating a fusion dish and using this brine to enhance certain flavors. I don't know. It's really up to you and what you're going for and what you're trying to create. But some suggestions I have are kind of universal components in just about every brine that I make. Items like smashed garlic, bay leaves, black peppercorns, lemon peels, vinegar, and tons of herbs, like all different ones. Parsley, rosemary, and thyme are my kind of go-to for the brines. They infuse so much flavor without overpowering your end dish. Another tip for brining that I have is boiling the brine. And this isn't a necessary step at all, no, but I have found in my experience that boiling the brine somewhat concentrates it. I usually cut the water amount in half, add all my ingredients, bring it to a boil, and then cut it off immediately as it comes to that boil. I then add the other half of the water in ice form so that it rapidly cools the brine. You always want to make sure that your brine is at least room temp before adding your bird, and always refrigerate while you're brining. And that's the basic brine. But there are so many other ways to brine poultry. Buttermilk brine, sweet tea brine, cola brine. These are staples in American Southern cuisine, and then there are brines that are made with cider or beer, where the acids in those solutions tenderize the meat. So, you've gotten this far, you've got the motor going in your head, and you're ready to brine the shit out of some bird. But there is one question we haven't covered yet, and that's how long should I brine my bird? And this is an important question. Different birds take different times for brining. But for today's episode, we're going to stick to the most common birds, turkey and chicken. I'll include a chart in the downloadable resource and on the resources page of the website that will list all of the poultry and their brining times. But for whole bird chicken, you should brine your birds for 4 to 6 hours. This will allow the brine to penetrate the bird all the way through, ensuring a juicy bird from skin to bone. Now, for chicken parts, it would take a little less, like 1 to 2 hours. Since the bird is broken down, it takes less time for the brine to do its work. Now, for a larger bird like a turkey, time is an important factor. You need between 12 and 24 hours. And that might seem like a large window, but birds don't come in all the same sizes. Larger birds like those 18 to 24 pounders, you need more time. Now, let's chat about dry brines. First, the question is, what are the benefits of dry brines? Well, when you dry brine, you get an even crispier skin, it's way easier to set up, and it boosts moisture and retention of flavor. It takes a little longer to dry brine than soaking it, but it's definitely worth it. To me, really, there's not a better one of the two. It's really the application that you're going for and the time you have to pull off what you want to do. So let's not confuse dry brining with curing. Let's define. Curing is used for long-term preservation of meat as well as flavor development and texture. The ingredients of curing usually contain salt and sugar, but they also contain a curing agent like sodium nitrate. The process takes anywhere from several days to even weeks. Now, on the flip side of that is dry brining, where the goal of the process is to boost flavor and retain the moisture of the meat before cooking. Dry brines contain mostly salt and take a couple of hours to a couple of days to complete. The processes may seem similar, but are very different and are used for two different applications. Now, how long should you dry brine your birds? Remember, we touched on it being a little longer than soaking in a wet brine. Chicken usually takes anywhere between 12 to 24 hours, and a turkey upwards of about 2 days. So you can see that it takes longer, so you got to have the time to pull this one off. A basic example of a dry brine would be 1 tablespoon of kosher salt, 1 teaspoon of sugar, and a half teaspoon of black pepper for every 4 to 5 pounds of meat. Now, the sugar and the black pepper are completely optional pieces, but they do help enhance the flavor and the texture. The sugar helps to brown the meat, and the black pepper complements the salty flavor. Pat the meat down with dry paper towels before adding this mix, then rub all over, including under the skin if you can. Refrigerate uncovered on a wire rack over a plate, and do not rinse the meat before cooking. Instead, you should pat the bird dry down again with paper towels before you cook it. Doing this will result in a much crispier skin, which is always the best part. So here's a pro tip. The longer the meat sits with the dry brine, the deeper the seasoning. Keeping it uncovered helps dry out the skin and give you that really nice crispy bite. Now, it is possible to overbrine poultry, which would be bad. Letting the meat sit in the brine for too long could lead to a mushy texture and oversalted meat, so you always want to keep an eye on the time when you're brining. You also want to rinse and pat dry the meat when wet brining. This will wash away all of those aromatics and flavorings, leaving their tastes and essence within the meat. Pat drying gives you that really nice sear or crispy skin. Brining will help you level up your bird game for sure, so try it. Try different combinations and recipes, and then send me photos and comments of your work on X or the website. I'd love to hear and learn from you too. I'll for sure put up a resource that expands and details the entire process for brining. It's a tool for chefs and cooks that give you that restaurant quality bird that's literally great for all occasions. Well, now that our brains are stuck on birds and brining, that brings me to my next topic, understanding the spice cabinet. And you know what that means. It's time for
Food for Thought.
Or what I like to call
Pro Tips from the Chef's List.
And today's advice topic is about understanding your spice cabinet. I think as a chef, home, or pro, this is a really important topic. When I build a recipe, I usually build it in categories, and the spice cabinet is one of the best pieces of that. The spice cabinet adds great flavors and aromatics, and almost everything in it has a long shelf life. So let's get into what exactly spices are. Spices are many things. Seeds, barks, roots, dried fruit parts. They're also herbs, the leaves and soft stems of herbs. Spices bring depth, warmth, and intensity to recipes, while herbs offer brightness, freshness, and lift. Think of it this way. Salt wakes the food up. Herbs and spices give it character. When I was a young line cook, I was working at a place where the chef was fairly new and changing the menu. We were offering farro as a side of a whole fish dish, and I guess I made the dish and sent it through the pass. When he tasted it, he brought it back to me to explain that there just wasn't enough herbs in it. He then had me taste it. Now, when I didn't taste anything wrong with it at first. It had the salt, it had the acid from the tomatoes, and my young palate just didn't recognize that this farro was begging for herbs. In this brief training moment, I was put on the spot in front of all my fellow cooks, and he said, "Herbs give dishes brightness. Do you notice how flat this farro is?" I tried to give an honest answer, but it was an answer of ignorance. He came around the pass and onto the line, and we made it together. Or actually, I should say, he made it, and I watched. He did exactly as I did when I made it, except at the end, he threw a handful, and I mean literally a handful of herbs into the farro. And then he had me taste it. And I was blown away. The farro, the base was still there, but the herbs brought out such a brightness, a lift. And he was generous when he added them. A young cook like me thought, well, damn, this shit's going to taste like grass. But instead, it complemented the base. It was one of those aha moments in my career and helped me think about dishes in their entirety and how to round out flavors. It helped me understand the salt, the acid, the herbaceousness, all of the components of flavor. It was a revelation for myself and my palate. As I grew into a chef, I built all of my recipes and dishes to include herbs and spices as components that complemented the final flavor of the dish I was trying to create. So, told that story. Now we're going to talk about, to organize spices a little better, I've divided them into 4 different categories. And no, this is not an official list, but it does help me when thinking about where they fit into recipes. So the categories are warming and deep spices. In this category, I like to put spices like cinnamon, clove, nutmeg, allspice. These flavors are warm, dark, and rich, and a little goes a really long way. They're great for braises, desserts, stews, and sometimes stocks or demis. Earthy and toasty. Cumin, coriander, and turmeric are some spices that highlight this category. And I like these a lot. I use them for roasted meats, curries, and starches like lentils, rice, and potatoes. I also use this category heavily when I make spice rubs for meats or marinades, and they complement other herbs extremely well. Hot and pungent. This category has a lot of powerful flavors that are used similarly to the earthy and toasty category. Chili powder, mustard, ground and seed, black pepper, dried chilies. These are very pungent spices and also take very little to make a huge impact on your dishes. They're great for barbecue rubs, stir fries, marinades, starches. They make an upfront presence on the palate, and they don't hide underneath. Usually you can taste these right away. And then there's the aromatic and fresh category. These flavors brighten dishes, but have distinct flavors that, if not careful, can easily overpower dishes. These flavors include cardamom, fennel seed, sumac, star anise. There's plenty of others in this category. I like to use these in brines and pickles, as well as dishes from the Mediterranean, Caribbean, and in Africa. Again, this is not an official list, and they easily mix and match with each other depending on where you're trying to go with your recipe. And they can be profiled by cuisine, which is also not a set-in-stone official list. Many of these spices are used across many cultures and cuisines. For instance, cumin. It's prevalent in Indian cuisine, but also Mexican cuisine. Both have their places within traditional recipes in their respective cuisines, but they're not tied to any one culture in specific. Allspice shares a cuisine with Jamaican and Middle Eastern cuisines, saffron in Spanish and North African. So you can see that these flavors intertwine, mix and match, and marry well with many other different flavors. And when this thought comes to mind, the possibilities are endless, and I think that's what's great about cooking, right? It becomes unique to the person who's cooking and the representation of that person's palate. Spices can last a long time if stored in cool, dark places. Ground spices can last up to a year for their peak flavor, and whole spices can last as long as 2 years if you grind them as you need them. And my advice is to purchase in small batches. Date them and never store them over the stove where it can heat up. Good rule of thumb here. If your paprika is older than your driver's license, throw it out. To unlock your spice's full potential and flavor, I'm going to give you a few tips. The first is toasting. Heat your spices in a dry pan to bloom the oils and bring out the flavors. Be careful not to overheat your pan and burn these spices. Charring them would cause them to become bitter. The next method to unlock the flavor of these spices is blooming. This process cooks the spices in oil at the start of the building of a dish. An example of this would be achote in Mexican or Latin cooking, where you toast the seed in oil before toasting the rice in that same oil before boiling. This method is also used heavily in Indian and Caribbean cooking as well. Fresh ground spices pack a big punch. I like to toast them to bring out the oils and then grind them in a coffee or spice grinder. This is probably one of the best ways to use spices in my opinion. And yes, you can buy spices that are already ground, but they just don't have the same punch and brightness. I always buy whole seed, toast, and grind. And sure, it's more work, but the difference is surely night and day. Ground spices that you buy at the supermarket come off flat and not as vibrant. And this method gives you richness of a freshly ground spice. Now remember, when using ground spices, I recommend that you layer these flavors by adding some in early for depth and then a little later for brightness. Understanding your spice cabinet is like learning the chords before you write the song. Master the flavor notes and you can cook anything, and probably invent some outstanding shit along the way. All right, this last section is for my young professional chefs. I want to talk about systems that help you control your environment in the kitchen. A great cook makes food, yes, but a great chef runs a system. This segment digs deep into professional kitchen systems that keep chaos in check, because flavor means nothing if the kitchen's a mess behind the scenes. This segment will walk you all through the tools every chef and kitchen manager should master to ensure consistency, efficiency, and control. These systems are the backbone of success in both high-end restaurants and efficient home kitchens. So first, let's talk about an obvious one, the schedule. This covers labor needs, defined labor costs, and sets the tone for morale and accountability. Most restaurants nowadays use an app or digital system to schedule, record time off, track shifts, and the costs that go along with it. The schedule is always built at least a week out. And restaurants that have a lot more going on or are busier, the schedules are built as far out as a month in advance. The chef's scheduling accounts for key prep days, parties and banquets, holidays, new menu drops, and any other event that the staff required would need to know in advance. And chefs, use this tool to set clear expectations in advance for your staff. Give them the respect of letting them know beforehand. If your schedule is a guessing game, your team's already lost. The order guide is as important as the schedule. Your costs usually boil down to three things mostly: payroll, food costs, and overhead. Payroll is governed by the schedule, and the tool to help you with the food cost is the order guide. Now, this won't save your food cost, but it will help you keep consistency in ordering and tell you your high-cost items. A proper order guide is organized with the vendor name, the category or location of the item's name, cost, and par. And then it usually has columns that are divided in two. The left side is usually for the on-hand count and the right side for the amount you needed to order. Now, when you subtract the on-hand count from the par, you get the amount you need to order. Notice how there's a formulaic way. There's no guessing. The pars are set by the P-mix, another tool that chefs use to help them understand consumers' buying habits so that they can more accurately set these pars on the order guide. Everything in a restaurant works hand in hand with each other. It's a formula that every successful restaurant has been using for years and years and years to come. If you're running out of onions on Saturday, it's usually not a shortage. It's a systems failure. The prep list is an extremely useful tool that all professional kitchens should be using in some capacity. Not every list is the same, no, but every functioning kitchen has one. This organizes the kitchen's workload and keeps everyone accountable and focused during prep hours, which is kind of key because most prep hours are done before service, before the restaurant is open and making money. Being intentional and deliberate in its planning will help maintain payroll costs as well as monitor and maintain ingredients' freshness and quality. When designing the prep list, it should include quantities, weights, and deadlines that are prioritized based on cooking time, space, and/or station needs. As the list is completed, back-of-the-house staff should be crossing things off the list to indicate their completion to the chef. It should also have a space where the person in charge of this list is actually counting and making quality control checks on all of the prep, so that this list is as accurate as possible. I don't know how many times I have had a sous chef or a cook do the prep list and say that we have it, only to find out mid-service that the shit is bad and unusable and there's no time to prep it. That's bad business. Without a prep list, your cooks are just guessing, and guessing is like throwing cash into a wood-burning stove. The pull thaw list is a list that usually is used at night or early in the morning to pull products from the freezer to thaw for service or processing. It ensures that product is ready for service and is safely defrosted in time. It reduces food waste and that last-minute panic when you realize something that you need is frozen 10 minutes before service starts. Then you start doing stupid shit like submerging it into water or throwing it in the microwave, and that's shoemaker shit. Don't do shoemaker shit. I hate that. Proteins, sauces, soups, and pastries often highlight this list, but it's really anything that you freeze that needs to be thawed out for service and should mark weights and quantities that need to be pulled. You can't serve what's frozen, unless it's ice cream, but that's not what we're talking here. And the walk-in doesn't care how busy you are. Have a pull-thaw sheet if you freeze. The recipe guide may be the single most important system and resource in the entire building. It ensures consistency from cook to cook, shift to shift, and helps train new staff and maintain quality under pressure. In the industry, this resource is often called the Bible and should be written in detail. These details should include weights, yields, and visual cues. All the recipes included should be consistent in measurement and flow and should point out what the person who is prepping it should be looking for. I try to write my recipe books as if my kids were the ones performing the prep. It must be simplified and use the correct language. Attached to the recipe portion of this book should be the dispatch specs. The specs detail how each dish should be plated with how much product and the placement of those products. It should also list allergens, potential substitutes, which plate it's plated on, and any other accompaniment that's going along in the final presentation of the dish. This Bible becomes a source of accountability to all members in the restaurant and is their reference when questions about food and service arise. This should be updated as the menu is updated. Recipes aren't necessarily rules, they're more like tools, right? But if you don't follow your own tools, what the hell is exactly going on? Chaos, that's what's going on. Today's final thought has us focus on what it takes for a professional kitchen to succeed. And although it does take more than just these 5 systems, these create a base that helps you recognize costs and trends that will help you stay on track. Systems don't make the food, no, but people do. But strong systems make food possible. When you build a kitchen around tight systems, you don't just cook better, you lead better. You have a grip on your business. And that's how careers are built. That's how restaurants grow. And that's how cooks become chefs. So, follow us on X and share your questions, comments, or pictures of your work. And if you like the show, make sure you give us 5 stars wherever you're listening to this and head over to the IncrEDIBLEDiscourse.com and sign up for the newsletter. Oh, and while you're there, check out the resources section. It's filled with so much great information that will help you hone your basic skills and grow as cooks. For today, I thank you for your time as always. I'm Mark Grigsby, and you've just been put through the IncrEDIBLE Discourse.